Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. We're here at our gated community build, getting into some stair building. Stairs are one of the most intimidating things that a lot of carpenters go up against, but it's really not all that difficult. Here I'm getting started. I've got two levels of staircases to do. I've kind of got the first one done here, as you see, and I'm going to be taking you guys through the process on what I'm doing up here above. We're going to have a white oak staircase with an over-the-post handrail and a really unique riser feature. On this staircase, the risers are actually going to extend past the skirt board a 1/4 inch. Very unique detail. I'm going to show you how to cut these skirt boards, and I got lots of tricks and techniques to share along the way with this process. Hope you enjoy the video. Let's dig right in. Just for a little context, we're on the final push of this house. You guys have actually already seen this house a little bit. We built our library over here, but trim racks getting more empty. Basically just have to do the staircase and some wainscoting. We got a mess on the job site, lots of sawdust everywhere. But just to show you, foyer here, and then here we shot a lot of content on these bookshelves. So the painters have removed all the shelves now, and they're going to be getting started on painting those in the basement. So big push for me right now. Of course, everyone wants me out of here. That way the job can keep moving on. So we're trying to go full tilt on this staircase. We're going to start off by cutting our skirt boards. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Basically, on this side, obviously the skirt board is a continuous run. On this side, we've got our skirt board and it's all got to be notched out. So how do we do that? I've got it all laid out up here, and these are just temporary treads that I put back on. That way we could walk up and down. But here you see we've got a nice small section that I can do a little demonstration on how to cut these skirt boards. So here's a little trade secret for you. Going back years, we used to have a lot of issues with communicating in advance with the framer what type of flooring was going to be installed. And a lot of times they would frame the staircase for carpet, which meant that later on I would have to rip all of the framing treads and risers out. And doing that, I discovered this little bar right here, and it makes the process of tearing out treads and risers so easy, because you can basically hook the tread or riser in between here and use a lot of leverage. So whenever I have to tear out the framing treads, it's really easy just to get in here and you can pop these up really easily. So if you do much of this, one of these bars is worth its weight in gold. It's paid itself off many times. Now, the first thing I want to do before I can install my skirt boards and start laying them out, I need to double check and make sure all the rises and runs are correct, that the framer actually did it correctly. I would say about 90% of the time it's not correct. So it's something that you basically always need to be checking. You need to ensure that each rise, meaning each time that you step, that it's an equal step up each time. If it's not, that won't meet code. If it's above, I think it's a 3/8 variation, that won't meet code. And also your runs, you need to make sure are also the same. Here you'll see I've got blocks nailed onto the front of all of my framing stringers. That was because the framer didn't frame it correctly. Up here on the top of the stringer, he cut 3/4 of an inch off of the back. Now that is what you would do whenever you're framing a staircase for carpet, because in that case, the framer would be nailing on a 3/4 inch riser. In this case, I'm doing that, and I also need to nail a riser up here. So that pushes everything back 3/4 of an inch. So I only had an 8 1/4, this is supposed to be 9. So on all of these, I had to add 3/4 of an inch in order to get that corrected. So basically all that involves is taking some PL Premium and smearing it on the stringer, and then some finish nails through to nail those blocks on, and that'll set up really solid. So our next step is installing our skirt board. We've got to lay out the skirt board, cut it, fit it, and all that good stuff. You can already kind of see behind me, I've got a line here how do we go about getting that line? One of the reasons that it's really important to correct your rises and runs before you put your side skirt board in is because it could potentially move things up or down, and then you could end up with a gap down here in the corner if your skirt board is too high. So we want to be using a 1x10, that's what I like to use. And we want to have it just right so we've got a nice margin above our nosing on our treads, but we also want to have enough coverage that we're sure that we're not going to end up with a space back here. So basically what I start doing is I take a scrap piece of riser, 3/4 thick, and a scrap piece of tread, which you'll see right here. I'll put that in place down here towards the bottom, and then as you can see up here, I've got the exact same thing towards the top. That is going to give me this offset right here. Now, how much should that be? Basically, what I've been doing my entire career is I use my Stabila level, which is about 2.5 inches, I believe, 2 3/8, and that is the offset that I shoot for from the top of my nosing to the top of the skirt board. So for our layout, all we're going to do is very carefully put our level across these scrap pieces of nosing that I've got here. So you see I'm making contact here and I'm making contact up here. That's going to give me the angle that I want, and I can start laying this out. So from this point, I'll just take my pencil, mark across the top the whole way up. If you're on a really long skirt board, like a 16-foot long skirt board, I just mark the bottom and mark the top, and then I'll chalk a line between the two. In this case, we got a shorter section, so I can mark that the whole way. So now I've got the top of the skirt board laid out, and I know down here at the base, this is actually all going to be wainscoting. So we're going to be having our skirt board flow right into the baseboard detail. So in this case, I knew that I wanted this connection with my baseboard to be 5 3/4 inches off of the subfloor. So what I do is I just take my tape and I move it until it aligns with the skirt board at 5 3/4, and I make a plumb mark right there. I almost forgot one really important part. How do we know what angle to cut our skirt board at? The way I do this is I use a digital level. It's so easy to use. I've done that my entire career. Some guys will use pitch blocks and things like that. They'll maybe drop a skirt board in place and then use a level. I don't do any of that. I think the most efficient way is to use a digital level. So when I'm doing this, I leave my long level on here. I hit my power button on my digital level, and then it's going to tell me right here 40 degrees. So I know 40 degrees is the angle I need to be making my cuts at. All right, now I need to start measuring my skirt board. So I'm going to take these blocks that I was using, get those out of the way, and I like to use a nail and just tack that in place. That way I can pull a measurement from. So down here, I'm going to go to this point, which is essentially where the top of my skirt board will be cut down plumb, and then my baseboard will run into it. I want to pull my measurement from that point. I'm going to come and sit up here, and essentially I'm not sure how I'm going to finish my shoe rail and newel post detail right now. So for the sake of making this video, I'm actually going to leave my skirt board a little bit high, and then I'll just cut it down with a multi-tool later. But basically what I did to get my measurement, I knew I wanted to be high, so I take a little block right here, which is 3/4 inch. I'm going to line up the corner right there. Now I'll take my tape measure, hook it on my nail on the bottom, measure to that corner. It's 74 3/4. So as I'm doing this, a lot of times I'm writing things on the wall. Here I've got 74 3/4 written down. Now I want to basically draw out a diagram of how this skirt board is going to look. I also need to know the measurement from here to here. That's 4 3/4. I've got that written down also, and I know in my head that I want that down there to be 5 1/4 inch down on my plumb cut because I want it to match my baseboard height. So in real life, as I'm working, what this ends up being is I just draw the shape of what this skirt board is actually going to look like. So that's just a very general shape. I'll transfer my measurements. I got 74 3/4 there. I got 5 1/4 down here. I've got 4 3/4 up top right here. I don't need to know that, I don't need to know that, and I don't need to know that. I know that my cut is 40 degrees, so I'll note that, and then I can cut the skirt board and go to town. Now you might be wondering, our level gave us 40 degrees. What does that actually mean? The 40 degrees is gonna be your plumb cuts. So this cut will be at 40 degrees, and this cut will be at 40 degrees. This cut will be, I can't remember from geometry, it's called either the supplement or the complement, but it would be 90 minus 40 equals 50 degrees. So the flat cut then will be cut at 50 degrees, and this flat cut down here will be cut at 50 degrees. So I've got the board cut now. I haven't test fitted it yet, so we're gonna see how I did. Normally, whenever I cut these, this system, the way I do it, they turn out pretty much perfect every time. So I can see down here I'm lined up, and then up here, I'll just bump that up a little bit. So you guys can see that pencil line there. We want it to be dropped in place and bottom and top the whole way up. You can see that we're following the pencil line. I've got a 1/16 of space right here. I intentionally did that just to give me a little bit of margin for error, but my riser will end up covering all that, so it's no big deal. And then this, like I said, I wanted this to be 3/4 of an inch high, and I'm gonna cut this off. It might be flush with the subfloor. It might be up a little bit depending on how I decide to do that shoe rail detail later. Now we're on our open side, which is a lot more complicated cutting this skirt board out. Basically, first, we're gonna start by doing the exact same process that we just did. We're gonna cut the skirt board to length and notch it around, get it set in place, and then we'll mark the cuts for the rises and runs for our risers and treads. So basically what you wanna do, again, I'm just taking a scrap of riser and tread, setting it in place, and I want to make sure that I've got my 1x10 far enough up that I don't end up with a gap right here, but at the same time, I don't want to be too high up to where I don't have enough space down here. Here's an example just so you can visually see what I'm talking about. We're using a 1x10, so this distance right here is crucial. I've actually got about 8 3/4 if you go all the way up in there and measure down. So in essence, if this skirt board was dropped another 1/2 inch or 3/4 lower, I would end up with a space and a gap right here, and I wouldn't have enough coverage. So the idea here is we want to get this skirt board positioned just in the sweet spot to where we've got a decent amount of margin here going all the way down, but we also need to ensure that we've got some margin for error so that we don't end up with any gaps right here. As you can see here, I've already got my line drawn on here. The other crucial detail that I want to pay attention to is I want to make sure that this margin underneath my skirt board to the end of the corner bead is nice and consistent the whole way up. Now, because I already have done the skirt board right underneath me, I knew that I wanted to have a 3.5 inches right here just because that's the way it worked out. So what I did is I just started by taking my framing square, mark at 3.5 inches in my little notch there, drew a line, same thing on the bottom, drew a line, and then I can take my digital level and I can basically connect those lines. And then, so here on putting my level on the line, I've got 39.8, And if I bring my level down here on the corner bead, I've got 39.8. So I'm matching that reveal perfectly consistently. So as I did this, you'll remember earlier we had 40 degrees on the other side, and here I've got 39.8. It's just the way it worked out. Usually they're gonna be the same. It might have been just because of the way the drywall was applied with the corner bead. I've got a little bit different angle, whatever. Not a big deal that that's a little bit different in this case. To me, the most important thing here is I want this margin to be perfect along here. But if this is off 0.2 degrees versus the other side, it's not gonna be noticeable by anyone down the road. I just went through the same process that we did on the other side. So just dropping this one in place here. Looks good, nice down on the bottom. I'm even with my pencil line the whole way up. I'm just covering it up, which is good. So now the next step is gonna be to mark where the rises and runs are and notch this whole skirt board out. Now, normally, if I was installing box newel posts, I would also be taking into consideration where the box newels are gonna be. In certain situations, I even might install some of the box newels before I install skirt boards. In this case, I'm using a much smaller newel post, and it's really requiring that all of the treads and skirts and risers all be finished in advance. So I'm not really worried about newel posts at this point on this particular staircase. Now, in order to mark our risers and treads, we're gonna use, some people call it the Britches method, some people call it Dutchman's pants. And the reason that was because going back many years, the shape of this jig looked like Dutchman's pants, I guess. So that's what it's called. Basically all it is you're taking a board, you're cutting a little bit more than the thickness of your skirt board out of it. So I've got a little bit more than 3/4 cut out of this. It would even be more ideal if I would have had a piece of plywood, and it would be even a little bit taller, because then I could have went the full height that I needed to. In this case, I'm on the job site. I got to use what's available. So I took a scrap of 1x10 and made this cut. Now what we're going to do with it is essentially be setting it in place over our skirt board and then marking the side for our riser cut. So let me just demonstrate this here. So you may want to nail your skirt board in place just with a couple nails to ensure that it doesn't move. In this case, I feel really good. This one's locked in here with this kind of bird's mouth cutout down here. So I'm just gonna start dropping this in place. I'm gonna push it firmly in place. And then I'm gonna make a light pencil line on the back side of this. And that's just kind of a starting point, because we are going to come back with a level later on and make sure that these are perfectly plumb, because the framer definitely does not cut the stringers out plumb. But we're just getting a reference point right now. So just moving our way up, making a line on the back side at each riser. Now you guys will notice I'm actually marking on the back side of this template in this case. That's because our riser detail on this staircase is going all the way through. In the vast majority of the installs I've done, we're mitering the riser into the skirt board. And in that case, I need to be marking on the front side of my little template here, because we want to be mitering it. So just make sure that you note that difference. In this case, we're not mitering, we're running the riser through, and that's why I'm marking on the back side of the template. Now I also need to mark the underside of where my tread's gonna be so that we can make that cut also. We're gonna use the same method. We're gonna drop our jig down in place so that the whole thing is resting on the top of the treads. And then all I do is make a mark on the bottom as far back as I can, and then I move it forward, and I do the same thing, make a mark on the bottom, and just work your way up, mark, push it as far back as I can, make a mark. For the next step, we're going to be needing to make these lines plumb and level. Unfortunately, the framing stringers are often not cut with the risers perfectly plumb, and a lot of times the treads aren't perfect either. So what I like to do is I make a lighter line first when I'm using my template, and then I'll go back through with my level and I'll make a plumb and level line with this guy, as you see here. Now the thing I want to do is I want to find the point on my previous line that's as far forward and as far up as possible. And then I want to plumb down from that with a darker line so that I know which line I'm cutting to. As you can see here, my lighter line, it was about an 1/8 inch out of plumb. So I went from the furthest point forward and plumbed down. It's important that you go to the furthest point forward, because if you don't, and then you go and put your riser on, you'll have a gap right here. So we need to make sure that when we cut this, we're staying just a little bit forward even of what our actual line is. Same thing whenever you do your treads. So I'm going to look at my two lines. I'm going to see which one is higher than the other. And I'm going to make a nice level line across there. So as you see here, I'm just a little bit higher than this line, and then this line here, I'm about a strong 16th higher with my actual line. That's important that I get that higher when I make my level mark. That way, whenever we make this cut and then put our finished tread down, we get a nice tight connection right here. So everything is all marked. We're all plumb and level. So now I'm going to take this down to the miter saw and cut everything. So the first thing I do is match my pencil lines to the angle on the saw. I know that I should be around about 39.8 or 40 degrees. I'm putting the shadow line of my blade here on my pencil mark, and I'm right at a little under 40 degrees, so that's great. Now the one thing that I do that's very important if you want to get a really crisp result is I don't cut these square in the sense of a vertical cut. I cut them a few degrees out of plumb, and that makes my connections a lot better. So here, after I've got my miter angle, I'm going to move my bevel angle over. It can be anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees, like so. So now I'm cutting down into it this way. If we go back over here to the staircase, I'll show you why that's important. We want our risers and our treads to come together in a way that's really tight. So if you come around on the back side here, whenever I nail this riser onto my skirt, I want this to be super tight. Same thing on the underside where my tread is. I want that to be super tight. So by angling my cut in a few degrees, that gives me some space to put PL Premium and get a nice bond, while at the same time keeping the connection really tight on the back side of these pieces of wood. Now the key thing whenever you're cutting these pieces out you want to make sure that you're not cutting too much. You really should not be cutting any of your pencil line off. If you're cutting your pencil line off, that means you're making your cut too far back, and that might result in your piece, the end, not being tight. It might end up being, there might be a gap there. That's why we want these cuts to be a little bit forward and higher of our actual framing. So at this point, I can go ahead and take these triangle pieces off, and then I'm going to take my jigsaw and cut this little piece right here out. Now with my skirt boards, I always hit them with a sander, get them nice and smooth before I install them. Helps if you plug it in. All right, we've got our piece all cut. It's just a matter of dropping it in place right here like so. Everything looks good. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. This was the first part of the process. We're gonna cut this into 2 videos, and the next video will be actually installing the risers and treads, show you how we're doing that. So give me a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. Let me know if you do anything different. Appreciate you watching as always, and be sure to check out the next episode where we install the risers and treads.